Wait for the camera.
Howdy, my name is Jenny Beckett and I'm a senior education major from Plano, Texas. But more importantly, I'm a proud member of the Fighting Texas Aggie class of 2015.
Hey!
And
Woo!
I was born in Charlottesville, Virginia on May 24th to Paula and Jason Beckett. I was a very dainty 10 pounds, 3 ounces, and their second beautiful daughter. From then on, my life was pretty standard. I stayed up all night to annoy my mother and slept all during the day. Then my father announced we moved to Florida. Although I was devastated at the time, the first time I found turtles in the backyard of my new home, I immediately got over the situation. We lived in Weston, Florida for around 4 years. As children, my sister and I loved living there. It was absolutely beautiful, beyond something you could even truly imagine. But the first time my mom found a gator in the pool, she decided it was time for us to go. From there, we moved to the very boring Plano, Texas, and it was as awful as the name sounds. I was 9 by the time we finished our move, and I was already out of things to do. The neighborhood was full of adults and no parks. But living in this town allowed me to find the two major passions in my life. I started playing around with cakes when I was 12 years old. I would just hang out in the kitchen, mostly annoying my mother as much as possible. And of course she told me they were masterpieces, and of course I believed her, but looking back I realized that was a complete lie. I started my first cake class at Hobby Lobby when I was 12 years old. I remember very specifically making my very first pink rose, which looked absolutely horrible, but the teacher encouraged me anyway. I made friends with more middle-aged women than a 12-year-old should be allowed to have, but they taught me so much over the years. I actually met one of my future employers there. He told me that he was a decorator at a cupcake shop in Dallas, Texas. It was called The Cupcakery. He, for some reason, even though I was 15, allowed me to interview for them and just waited until I was on my 16th birthday to actually let me start working. I started as a counter girl and very quickly tried my very best to learn as much as I could and got promoted to the back. I worked there for 2 years and ended up working in before school and after school and basically as much as I physically could. My boss saw my schedule as dedication, but I saw it more of like a hobby. By the time I was 17, I was promoted to the head decorator. This was about the same time I started tutoring people in English. I was just in high school and I would tutor middle school students in English after school. I actually really found out that I loved watching people learn about books. I loved the look on their face when a book would finally click for them. The only feeling that really challenged that for me was when people saw my cakes for the first time. Because of my management position at the bakery, I was able to spend less time at work and more time tutoring these kids after school. It was something that actually really surprised me, but I enjoyed it more than I thought. When I turned 18, I had a choice, baking or teaching. It was actually my promotion that made me realize that I didn't want to stay there. I was 17 or 18, and I hadn't gone to pastry school, and I was managing people who had been in pastry school for years. They were usually about 40 or 50, and I was their 17-year-old boss. That made me realize that I wanted to go more along the traditional route and go to a four-year college to study education. The fact that I'm giving this speech right now makes that choice pretty clear. After a certain amount of campus tours and dragging my dad basically all through the state, I decided on A&M. I applied as soon as the application came out. You know, the one that you guys filled out, and it was the same one for the entire state. I sent them basically everywhere, but I was only really watching A&M. I got my acceptance packet a few months later. Now, my mom, of course, being excited as well, opened it before I got home from school, and 4 years later, I'm still really bitter about that. Although the move was a terrifying change, I immediately fell in love with A&M. I lived in the dorms my first year, and I knew I had chosen the perfect major. My first field work was working with kindergartners, and it's a really hard thing to explain. They're 5 and 6, and they're honestly kind of frustrating because they don't like to pay attention, they don't like to listen, but you keep going after a couple times and you work with these kids that have trouble reading and they have all these home problems, and at first they don't want to talk to you, they don't want to pay attention to you, but around the 3rd or 4th time you come in and they ask the teacher if they can go with you. And that for me was the moment that I knew that I was in the right place in my life. And as much as I enjoyed working with these students, they made me realize one very, very important thing, that I needed to work with older students. So I moved on to my next field work. This was my sophomore year in college, and I had to work with something much more challenging for me. It was the ELI program through Texas A&M. So I was teaching English to grown-ups. basically, people who were older than me. The ages ranged from 18 to 45. So probably about 90% of my class was married and had kids and did not think of me as a teacher because I was 19. None of them spoke English. Most of them came from the Middle East. Some came from South America. And although in some aspects, because they're adults, they were easier to teach than, 4 and 5-year-olds, in some aspects they were much more difficult. They taught me a lot about reasoning with your students and having to adjust your lesson plans to deal with people. As much as they were a challenge for me, they really did, it was so hard going from 4 and 5-year-olds and 5 and 6-year-olds and all this, and having people sit in your lap and braid your hair when you're reading to them, and they're like, oh my God, you're so cute, Miss Beckett. That's what I was used to when I'm going to people who are 40 years old, and they're like, why am I learning this? And that was the first time in my life that I had to explain to someone why what I was saying was important. Never had to explain that before. You sit there and you teach all these lessons, but you just kind of hope that they listen and they pay attention. So even though that was in my sophomore year of college, and that was for my first semester I was required to do that, I ended up continuing to do it just as a volunteer program. And as cliche as that sounds, they just hooked me. This is my 4th semester doing it with them, and I see them out in the town, and I love talking to them and just being like, you know what, you can do it. Just come and talk to people and you'll be fine. That's really all I did in college so far. I have my next fieldwork coming up soon, but for now I'm just enjoying the kids that I get to work with every day. In the end, I may not have done much in my life yet, but I love what I've done so far, and I'm fortunate enough to have the opportunity to do so and know what I want to do for the rest of my life. Thank you so much for listening, and are there any questions?
How long did you work at the Cupcakery, Jenny?
I worked at the Cupcakery for 4 years.
What was your favorite cake that you ever made?
My favorite cake I ever made, I had Star Wars themed cupcakes for a little 6-year-old's birthday, and when he saw them, he absolutely just freaked out. It was the best thing he's ever seen.
Why did you choose... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
What grade do you want to teach in the future?
I'm hoping for middle school, 4th through 8th is my major, but I like 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. 8th graders are sassy.
Why English?
Honestly, that was the story I was telling Lauren, Mr. Borowitz. When I was in 10th grade, as you guys can tell, I talk really fast. And he used to spend probably 3 or 4 days a week with me, teaching me how to public speak. And I used to be worse, which is saying something. But he would spend time public speaking with me, and when I was talking in front of the class, he would sit in the back and make funny faces and be like, and after he'd be like, did you have coffee today, Jenny? Stop drinking coffee. Oh my goodness. Tell your mom to stop letting you have coffee. And there's something about that class that was just so different for me. It was so personal, and we got to actually talk and discuss, and it was great.